Thank you. We're waiting for Miss Moore. We'll wait just another minute or two before we start. What do you think, Will? Should we go ahead and start? Okay.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of people here, so we should start.
Okay. Welcome everybody to February's Community Engagement Committee meeting. And I do remind us all that community engagement is one of Orange County School District's 4 priorities with equity overall, those being equity, literacy, enhanced culture and climate, and community engagement. This committee meeting functions as a planning how we as a board can succeed in engaging our Orange County Schools community, but this meeting also serves to be a safe place for hearing where we have been weak or inadequate. We must hold a safe space for conversations regarding racism or other community burdens. These can be tough conversations. Therefore, I'd like to remind myself and other board members to sit with or acknowledge uncomfortable emotions as they present themselves, but to avoid making dismissive comments of the feedback we receive. And so our first item this morning, approve minutes from the January Community Engagement Committee meeting, which I believe was January 8th. I think it had the wrong date in Assembly. Did you get a chance to review those?
I did. They're very detailed. I'm not used to that level of detail, but it's good. So motion to approve.
Okay. And I don't see Jennifer yet. So what do we do? Can I second it and we approve it? Or?
You can.
Okay, I'll second it. And so those are approved.
No, you got to vote.
Okay, you want to vote there, Will?
Yes, aye.
All in favor? Aye. I say aye. Okay. I did have a question from that. At the end, it mentioned moving forward with the minority summit, and it mentioned the grandparent event. And we don't have to do anything about that right now, but I feel like it was a little bit murky minority summit because we talked about wanting to hear more input before we made concrete decisions. Do you recall that? How do you recall that?
What I recall is we didn't take a vote and therefore it never passed. So it's left in the state of getting more information. We should have voted either way, but we didn't. We can't fix that, but it did not pass because we didn't vote. So we should leave that on our agenda as an item to keep investigating. Would be my recommendation.
Okay.
So we don't lose it.
I'm good with that. I don't lose track of that. Without further ado, I'd like to pass off to Dr. Keeling, who is going to lead us in some guidance and training this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Ask for some grace because I have, good morning, sorry. Never done a share on this before, so I was practicing this morning, so hopefully everything goes well. All right, so let's get into the PowerPoint. Okay, so I would like to ask everyone to put in this first link into their web browser. It'll take you to an answer garden. So you could type that in. Because I am new to this, I can't see everyone. But Ms. Doyle, if you could, or Ms. Hauser, I can see you guys. Give me a thumbs up when you get there.
Ms. Keeling, if you hit the present button in the upper right, it will pick up the whole screen.
Okay, sorry. There we go.
I'm there.
Okay. Oh, see, the problem, Mr. Jones, is that I got to be able to click to other things. That's all. All right, so. Hold on 1 second. So you should see maybe I can just, a question. Is this what everyone sees? What words and phrases describe the history? Okay. So if you will just type in words and hit submit, and then the words will pop up. So let's take about 2 minutes and type in words and phrases that describe the history of Orange County schools. And everyone can participate in this activity. It doesn't just have to be board members. I don't see anything showing up on my screen. Are people entering anything? Okay, you are?
So Dina, I'm sorry to interrupt, and good morning, everyone. Might we just ask everyone who's on to pick versus making an optional review?
Oh, yeah, everyone can.
So
I just see
Dina,
answers.
when I type in words, I can see what's coming up on my screen. Everyone answers.
Not everyone's answers?
No, I can see the words popping up in the
I had to refresh my screen.
there we go.
Thank you, Connie.
Gina, this is only giving me like, it's about 20 characters, is that correct? It doesn't give me much room.
Right.
Right. So there you go.
And it's a word garden. So even like when you put in phrases, it's gonna like pull them apart into words. Okay, I'm gonna refresh one more time and see if anyone has any others. We're still entering in. Okay, so let's pause here for a second. And anyone have any thoughts or comments? Looks like traditional stood out. I would like for the people who put in traditional to explain, what does traditional mean?
Well, I was one of the people who put in traditional. Do you want me to speak up?
Sure.
No, I was thinking, I think I first tried old fashioned. Maybe that didn't, I was thinking of this sort of like Americana, sort of like a classic colonial kind of town.
Okay, so I'm hearing Americana, I'm hearing classic, and colonial. Anyone else put in? Anyone else pick traditional? Can explain what is meant by traditional? Okay. Anything else stand out to anyone in this answer garden?
So what did it looks like traditional was the largest and the other words are all the same size. Does that mean only one person put them in? Is that what that means?
So if you can see on my screen, and if I hover over, it says how many people put those. So yeah, the more times people put in that word, the bigger it gets. So what's interesting for me in this is that there's just a lot of ones. Everyone, in traditional, I only had 2 people, so it doesn't a lot of people see the same things in terms of the history. So let's go to this second one. It's also an answer garden. If you will go to that link. Miss Doyle, if you could put a thumbs up, I can see you, or Miss Smiley, Miss Braxton. Okay, got it. So our second question is, what words or phrases describe the culture of Orange County schools? Same thing, type in words. I'll refresh one more time, give people a few more seconds to enter that in. Oh, I see more popping up. So let me refresh again. Anything stand out to anyone in this one?
A lot of these words are negative. That's something that stands out to me.
Some of the words kind of echo like hierarchical, like in different ways. I kind of say that.
Okay. Any other thoughts? All right. Last one. We will all go to this last answer garden. I have those same people on my screen: Ms. Doyle, Ms. Smiley, Ms. Braxton. Got it. Thank you, Ms. Braxton. Last question. What are the assets of Orange County Schools? Can I give people a couple more seconds and hit refresh a couple more times? So what stands out for people for this one?
The community support. I mean, during COVID, it's been amazing how many people have helped in so many ways. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
I'll say the teachers too. I mean, it's been amazing what they've had to do in such a short time, and nobody knew how to do it. You know, it's that sticks out to me as well. Just how much they've done to get us to where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Atherton. So I want to show you all the results when this was done with our equity task force, which consists of community members as well as staff. And these are community members, some of whom have lived here their entire lives, went through Orange County schools, have kids, grandkids that have gone through Orange County schools. Some of them are current parents. Some are parents whose kids have not now graduated, went through Orange County schools, graduated. And we have new staff who just came on board fairly recently. We have staff who have been here for years. And so here are their answers. This is what their word garden looked like to the first question, which was describe the history. Things stand out for people.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but will you be able to share this with us at the end?
Sure. Mhm.
Like of screenshots or whatever? Thank you.
Right. I actually have it in a PDF, so I can send it. Mhm. Anything stand out around their words about the history?
Well, complicated is right. I think that really resonates.
I mean, I'm glad to see there's thoughts around progress, and there's several words in here of hope, if you will.
Right. So, you know, the word garden splits words up. And so progress was actually work in progress. And I think it was like changing, and it was actually hard to make changes. And I'll send this all to you so you can see what the words were that were split up. Here's what came out for the culture. Any thoughts about the culture?
White people is large.
And then, oh, I'm sorry. Did someone have something else for culture? And then the last one is, here's what came out for assets.
That's really positive to see community.
Yep. So I want to stay within my time. So what are the takeaways from this activity?
Strikes me is how the view of the school mimics the structure of the community. You know, our community, as a community, we're highly segregated. We're diverse and highly segregated, and it's generational. It's been going on like that for a long time. Interesting how that those same views seem to be, perceived in the schools as well.
Right. So one of the recommendations from the Equity Task Force that were presented when they came and presented to you all was for you to continually grow in your knowledge of equity, how to be an equity leader, how to lead a district with equity. And so I'm grateful to Ms. Doyle for giving me a few minutes at the beginning of each of the community engagement meetings for us to kind of do this, because it's a way for us to center our minds around what does it mean as I go into this meeting being an equity leader. And so the first takeaway from this activity or reflection for you all is that equity leaders must always have an understanding of the historical context, how it affects the current culture. I'm sorry, that should be and outcomes. So we didn't just magically get here, right? Where we are today, all of the outcomes that we see when we look at data all have their roots in the history of Orange County schools. And that history hasn't magically gone away either. That history is affecting our current culture. So when you see those words like complicated, white, hard to change, like words that people were saying, risk averse, political, all of that is affected by the history. The second takeaway or a reflection point is that equity leaders must recognize that there are multiple perspectives, and you have to keep the perspectives of those who are most affected by the trauma centered. So as you can see, you all had different ideas. Like it would just be one person that said this and one person that said that. And your word garden, with the exception of the assets, looked very different than the word garden of the Equity Task Force, right? It's multiple perspectives of what the history and what the culture is like. But we also have to recognize that that history has a different effect for everyone. And even if two people go through the same history, they are affected by it in different ways. Trauma is really not defined by the event. Trauma is defined by the person's reaction and how the event affected them. And so we have to recognize, just because I went through this history or just because I'm sitting in this culture and I'm okay with it, it doesn't mean that the person sitting next to you isn't traumatized by it. And we often only look at that dominant one because trauma sometimes can seem like that's not the dominant voice or the dominant culture, but we have to take that trauma and center it, because we always have to be mindful that we're not re-traumatizing people. The third reflection point is that equity leaders must acknowledge their place in the history, culture, and outcomes. Sometimes I think people think like the board is over here, the district's over here, the teachers are here, administrators are here, and that is not the case. When I talk to people in the community, they very much see the board and the district like this or like this. It's the same thing. And particularly, we realized this week that there is a history that is affecting the board, or that was in the board, that affects some of our current cultures. And so as a board, you can never think that I'm over here, the district's over here, teachers and everybody else are over here. And as a district leaders, we can't think the board is over here, because we're all a part of that history. We all play a role in that. We all have to acknowledge that. And we all have to work together to dismantle that. Which takes us to the last thing, which is that equity leaders must leverage the assets to dismantle those negative contexts, to grow the positives, and to create a new history, a new culture, and more equitable outcomes. And so, like Mr. Atherton said, that community stood out, and that community stood out for the task force as well. Our community, our students, our teachers are our greatest asset. And so we have to always be mindful of, what words am I making grow in this garden? Am I making complicated grow? Am I making traditional, which was Americana, which for some people, traditional and Americana means trauma, right? Every time I speak in these meetings, what word did I just make grow? And the goal for us should be to make those positive words grow, the hope to make that grow, the changing to make that grow. We saw that diversity was really small, and we like to think that we're diverse, but that doesn't speak to the culture of who we are. So how am I making that word diversity grow? And so those are the takeaways that and the reflections that I'd like for us to think about. And I'm gonna stop sharing over here because it's hard for me to do that. But do you all have any final thoughts, reflections? And then I'm gonna turn it over to Ms. Doyle.
The only other thing I would say is that, you know, in my career, we often talk about a gap analysis of where you think you are versus where the reality of what your blind spots are. And I think this is just this was an excellent exercise to show us that there are lots of blind spots, and we need to be able to reach out and understand and get the perspectives, like you said, because, you know, it's clear, very difference in that. But like you said, I'm very hopeful with that community that everybody has in common. We can grow off of that and learn more.
Thank you, Mr. Atherton. Any other final thoughts in my final minute?
I have a question, and I realize that the context of this conversation is equity, but when I think of trauma and trauma for our kids and trauma for our families, there's so many other factors that are creating trauma, you know. And I remember, I don't know if you were here, it was before you were here when we had the King over at Eflin Cheeks. You all remember that, you know, and you know, and it created trauma in the community. But how do you bring the assets of our community and our support and our commitment to a supportive culture and a supportive environment to say, wait a second, how do we be sensitive to these different forms of trauma that are affecting our people? I think the words I hear are safety when you talk about this. How do we create a safe place? And that shows up differently for so many of us. So just curious, and I realize it may be off topic, but we're talking about one kind of, that's all. I want to just leave it there.
Thank you, Ms. Hauser. And I would just say that that wasn't like just an equity exercise, that was the history, right? And so when you talk about King and King, I think that was a book. Was this okay? And I think in actuality that was equity. There was an equity issue there, right? And so the trauma is not about, oh, that's an equity issue. And that's another thing. Like, we can't compartmentalize this. The trauma is about the history and how it affects the culture. And so what happened in that King and King spoke to the culture of Orange County schools, right? And so that is what we're getting at.
It spoke to it spoke to the culture of the community that Orange County Schools operates in. It was a book about a kiss between two boys that just sent the community into tailspin. The school did the right things, but the community reacted. I know, in our families, as you know, our families have two moms, two dads, two grandparents, or kids raised by grandparents, sexual trauma, poverty. That's all in addition to race and gender identity. Pick it. But there's so many traumas affecting our children every day, and there's a question about being able to normalize the reality of life and humanize it. And so I'm just gonna, that's all. I just think that sometimes that we're always hitting a trauma. Everybody's got their stuff, right? And I realize that there's a historical trauma around race, but there are other traumas that are affecting our families that I'm not sure we're always sensitive to. That's all.
Can I just share
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I think if I could just share a thought, Bonnie, I think I see what you're saying and agree. I think the thing that I'm noticing in both that example and sort of some of the ideas of history and race too is kind of related to this idea of conservative or traditional, in that I think historically how the district has operated, the sort of dominant groups, right? So white people, straight people, the people who sort of historically have had the power or the, socially normalized whatever, that's sort of what's gotten centered or prioritized or something like that in sort of a historical sense. And so I don't know, I see like a real relationship between thinking about this through race or thinking about this through some of those other lenses too, is I think just where has the sort of center of gravity been for the district? I think there's some like parallels there.
No question. It's I think the word traditional, when we the word garden had the word traditional, and we mainstreamed some pretty old concepts about the way life is. And our community does that, and so I'll just stop. I think we.
Yeah, and I would just add that I certainly agree that everyone has their stuff and everyone has trauma, but I would just remind us, and I know you all know this, that the degree of the trauma and the type of trauma and the amount of trauma certainly varies. And we need to keep that in mind as well. I think trauma is part of the human condition, but clearly some people have more trauma at a greater depth and different ways than others. So just wanted to toss that in there.
I really thank you, Dr. Keeling, for this exercise. It really, I had to practice my own words there to sit with the uncomfortable moments. But I like Will's point about the gap analysis of where we think we are versus our blind spots. And I think something that I think about sometimes is like, we want to have the hope and move forward to where we can go, but we ignore where we are and where we can't skip the hard truth to get to the good stuff. And I'm hoping that the good stuff is that, we're so, we've historically been so resistant to change and so centering the dominant group, as Sarah said, that it makes us hard to shift. But hopefully as we shift, some of those strengths of community can then become assets, and not the resistance to change. I want to be mindful of Ms. Moore's time. She's speaking next. And so thank you for everyone. And close us out with any thoughts before we pass to Ms. Moore.
No, I thank everyone as well. I thank you, Ms. Doyle, for giving me this time. I would just encourage everyone to continue to reflect about the culture and the history, and recognize the culture speaks to what's happening right now. The history speaks to what's happening in the past, and how it affects the now and how it affects our outcomes. So just spend this from now until the next time we meet, kind of reflecting on that. And I'm always here if you guys have thoughts, questions that you want to shoot me an email or call, text, whatever. That's my role, is to be that support for you all.
Excellent. Okay. Jennifer, do you want to share next about an outreach update?
Yes, thank you. I've been in contact with Dr. Sue Florence about helping us engage and rebuild trust, excuse me, with the Black community. For personal reasons, she is not able to attend today, but she plans to attend future community engagement meetings. She did advise me she's willing to open Cedar Grove Community Center when it's safe to do so. She's been advised that, she advised me that she feels more Black families would likely meet at Cedar Grove versus a faith-based organization. She said that it's also more likely that members of the Black community would help us to spread the word if events are hosted at Cedar Grove. She also indicated the Black community for many years feel that they were never heard. So to rebuild trust, we need to take measures to ensure that their voices are heard and form an action plan of some sort to help bridge the gap. And that is my update with her. I do have to follow up with her on Tuesday. And so I'll share that information with you at that time. Thank you.
Jennifer, I have a question. When we talked about, briefly at the beginning, we talked about the minutes from January, and we have in the minutes, and we mentioned that the conversation came about the Minority Summit. And so Will reminded me, we sort of made a motion. I think maybe he made the motion, I seconded it, but we never voted on it. And then we kind of got some feedback that we needed to sit and listen better before we, the idea of listening before we plan. Or does this tie in with this? How do you feel the Minority Summit idea, and like it kind of ties with what you talked about with letting Dr. Florence be?
Yes, I do. I feel that will tie in. Yeah, listen first and get a feel of the community and how they are feeling, so we will be able to make plans that are effective.
Other questions or comments for Ms. Moore?
I just have a comment, and I don't know if Ms. Stowe is on this call. I know Dr. Keeling is and can certainly speak to this as well, but what you just shared in terms of your feedback from Dr. Florence, Ms. Moore, aligns with the feedback that we heard from Ms. Thompson, who we know works closely with Dr. Florence, and the team of others who participate in with the faith-based group. that Ms. Stowe and Dr. Keeling have been leading, and in an effort to try to understand and get to the root causes with regards to engaging the Black community and Latinx community. So as I listened to the feedback that she gave you, I just want to say that it aligns to what that group is saying, which includes Ms. Thompson, who again works with Dr. Florence at the Cedar Grove Center. So it's exciting, just alignment and messaging about how we can build bridges and restore trust. And they emphasize the need to listen and let the people be heard and believe what they say. So thank you.
Yeah. Madison, about suggesting maybe even just the board show up at Cedar Grove. And they don't know, technically, they don't know us. They just don't know us, and they don't know us to say, I've got a problem, I want to make a call. But that was something that was raised to me. I don't know if there's a, Efland has kind of its own Black community. Hillsborough has its own Black community, and I don't know if Cedar Grove is considering being kind of an organizing place, or if they're asked if there's a suggestion that we reach into the different communities separately. And Dr. Rainey might have a good feeling about that, since she runs the Faith Collaborative for the MLK Faith Collaborative, and she's done that for 25 years. Anyway, I just don't know but I love the idea. I guess I just don't know if there's a broader reach. So
Dr. Florence did mention about Eflin, kind of like combining, but hosting at Cedar Grove. So she does want to involve all groups, Ms. Housen, all communities.
Any other thoughts or questions for Jennifer?
Sorry. It just came to me, some other things she mentioned. I'm so sorry. She did mention the reason about Cedar Grove is because a lot of families of color, she wants to work with them on like how to apply for FAFSA college scholarships, opportunities, things of that nature, because out in that area, oftentimes they do not receive that type of information. So that was something else that she did note too, that she hopes that we can help with that too, to get more information out to those communities.
Thanks for doing that outreach, Ms. Moore. I think that's great. And I know that, yeah, it just has me thinking about, I know that the high schools do some of that, work with their students on FAFSA and things like that, but is there a way to bring it to, the community centers and the different places and, at the point where they're able to host things in person or whatever, to be able to do that a little bit more?
I know that Ms. Stowe and Family Engagement recently had a parent academy on FAFSA. It's either last week or this week, and we need to have more than one setting. Maybe that parent academy setting draws certain parts of our community, and maybe we need to have another setting for other parts of our community. I can see this.
Ms. Doyle.
Here she is.
I just wanted to chime in. Yes, our family liaisons conduct parent academies in 4 languages, record those. They typically do 2 or 3 a month. They did recently do one on FAFSA, and they have communicated with Cedar Grove and are looking at opportunities to offer that same academy session, as Ms. Moore mentioned, when it's safe to do so. and when we're invited inside, but to offer that session at Cedar Grove so that some people can be in person, socially distanced, and then we're offering the session. Right now, they're offering it from an office or often their home because they're in the evening. So we want to start rotating those around when we can start bringing people in.
Well, the opportunities. What community centers, that's in addition to the paper organizations. Community centers, Grove, Efland, and Rogers Road. And the Rogers Road Center serves the Chapel Hill district. And they've been around a lot longer, and they have this strong support from the university, and the fundraising is extraordinary, is unbelievable. Have a relationship with their school districts where so the centers have after school and summer programs in different flavors, but Cedar Grove and Efland have been operating completely separately from the school district, whereas Rogers Road operates with the district, so that the district teachers actually staff the summer programs and work with the center. Now, I don't know what outcomes, implications there's been to that, but there's a question about, is there a way for these community centers as ways to extend our reach into the community and help bring educational resources into the community. So just a thought.
Yeah, and I thought that headed, which is probably a really great thing. Ms. Moore, I really appreciate your Florence for us and for our committee, and it's been so great to hear her feedback, her willingness to when things are for her. Any other questions or thoughts?
It's really breaking up for me. Is that happening for others or?
Yes, Carrie, you're breaking up.
Yes.
You're pixelating.
Okay.
It may help if those of us who are not speaking, if we mute, it may help.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Okay, I'm just going to speak with my video off though, but I just wanted to say thank you, Ms. Moore, for making that bridge for us to Dr. Florence. I think that's really vital. And Jennifer and I communicated about that a little bit offline as well. And just Dr. Florence's willingness to participate with the committee is really important. And so, again, we just want to keep growing our skills as a committee to be a safe place for people to come and share their experiences with us. So, More, do you have more that you would like to add? Does anyone have any questions or last comments there?
Yes. In one of our conversations, Dr. Florence did mention about it would be helpful, and she'll work with us about bringing representatives in from historically Black colleges and universities, even down to Durham Tech. So those representatives can come in and basically give information about how to apply to the colleges and universities, degree programs, things of that nature, for parents as well too, so they can, make better decisions or the best decision for their child's college education. So she wants to incorporate that too, and I think that would really be a good thing. That's it this time, I promise.
That's awesome. Can I add one thing? Just that idea made me think of, I think Orange has had like an HBCU fair before. I don't know about Cedar Ridge. So it makes me wonder also if there's just better opportunities to sort of advertise some of the things that are happening so that all the parents who are engaging with the Cedar Grove Community Center sort of have that calendar of events and know about those things, or people can sort of flag specific things for them. I love that idea of making those more available to more parents. not saying like, oh, that's already done, we don't need to do that. That was not my thing. I was realizing like, I think there could be like communication, like info spreading opportunity here too, potentially.
And it gets set up when it's safe to do so. And it looks like this is happening both with Ms. Moore's outreach and with Ms. Stowe and Family Engagement's outreach of going to the community center is really great. And when you mentioned Orange there, me, is it Dr. Is it Mr. Xavier, African American Studies?
Yes.
And maybe it'd be neat if he could join us sometime and meet people out there. Is he new to the area or is he from around here?
I don't think he is from here, and this is his first year working in the district, but he is awesome. And I'm sure he would be like, yes, I will do whatever needs to happen.
Okay, that's great. I know we have, I've got a request from Bonnie. Our next item is going to be hearing about the Flamboyan Fellowship update, but since we have a few minutes before 10, I know that Bonnie had something she wanted to bring before the committee to think about for the future, and I know she can't stay till the end. So Ms. Hauser, do you want to share that?
Sure. Stage it in the form of a petition, right? And petitioning this committee to take a look at how we might be able to improve our own transparency and the public's engagement with the board and the district. And three things have come up. One is there seems to be a great deal of public confusion about our board meetings and what's a business meeting and what's a work session. And I wonder if we might be able to have a conversation about restructuring that and simplifying it to make it easier for the public to engage in a constructive way. And second is to establish essentially a push notification process to alert stakeholders to meetings, announcements, press releases, and more. So we have a way to communicate with teachers and parents, but we don't have, people are always going, hey, what about the board agenda? Is it up? And this and that. And there are ways to just, it is pretty standard practice throughout this county to send push notifications when we want our stakeholders to know what we're doing. And the third is to establish a public listserv so that there'd be public access to email sent to the board. Essentially, it's treating emails like they're public comment. And I think many of our emails do. There's some private things that come up, but most of it really is a form of public comment. So how do we make it public? So those are three things I would hope that this committee might be able to talk about and then make recommendations to the board. Thank you, Karen.
Okay, thanks, Bonnie. And I have that in an email form from Bonnie. I'm guessing it's okay with you, Bonnie, if I send that out, because which relates what you're saying next month. Any questions?
No, the only thing oh, go ahead.
Will might be going to say what I was going to say. Go ahead and say what you were going to say, Will.
No, go ahead, Sarah.
My only thought on that last one is just flagging for you all on the public listserv that that's something the board had discussed in the past. And because so often individual students or staff members are named in those, that it's sort of it's a legal issue. And so I think for that one and the first one in particular, there's also a policy committee piece, and just flagging for the last one. I think we should definitely explore it, but we did explore it like a year or two ago, and that was a concern. So.
Yeah, Sarah, you're spot on. What I was going to say was policy committee, definitely we need to engage with any of these ideas. And like you said, we investigated it, but we didn't get too far because there was that decision tree that said legal needs to review. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't discuss it, but I know there was a concern with how much will it cost if it goes through there, but there was some discussion. Can the communications officer look at it and make a decision versus that, but there's complications. And the other thing I was going to say is on the second one, that is trivial, like a list server to set up where people can subscribe and get on and off. I think that's an easy one for us to look at, and the most common. And I think that would help, as Ms. Hauser mentioned, for people to be able to know that they're going to get information when something shows up on our calendar or if something's changed. So I definitely would like to, investigate that one too.
Okay, great. Well, I'll send out, the text of what Bonnie emailed in, and we can check in on this and do it that way. Does that sound okay with you, Bonnie? All right, great. So next on our agenda is a Flamboyan Fellowship update with Ms. Kelly. Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. And I'm going to give an update. I wanted to follow up on what several of you just commented on, specifically Ms. Moore, about the outreach and going. Well, I think everyone has agreed that the importance of going out. That's always been important, but that's even more important now as we bring back our students and we are maintaining social distance and we're working with cohort A and cohort B. And we need spaces. We need space to engage with our families and to do community outreach. And so I have worked with a parent resource center. I oversaw that. It was in a mall, doing outreach with public libraries, churches. It's really imperative that we're going out where people are right now. And I don't think that's going to end until COVID is completely gone. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And we will certainly follow up with Ms. Florence, Dr. Florence. All right, the Flamboyant Foundation update. I won't give the background. I've given that before, and Dr. Keeling, feel free to chime in. This process, the product, what we're looking for is the process, and it's a lot of what Dr. Keeling talked about. It's one thing that we're tasked with is a landscape analysis, and that includes interviews. And so as we look at interviewing our community, our stakeholders, our students, former students, key stakeholders, which we're going to need your help in identifying who those people are, then we conduct interviews. And there's several things we have to look at. Number one is who's the right person to conduct the interview. So in some instances, we know it needs to be a school-based staff. In some instances, maybe it's the new person. Some instances can't be the new person. It's got to be someone who's been here. So we've really got to be intentional and thoughtful in who conducts the interviews. And then also looking at, is it a one-on-one interview? Is it a focus group? Is it virtual? Is it on the phone? And so just really looking at how do we best capture feedback from our community and our stakeholders, and definitely our families. And then we also want to seek and solicit feedback from those who are disengaged and who are underrepresented. So that's one piece of what we're doing. The other piece is kind of more internal. And Todd, if you can let me share my screen, because no one wants to watch me talk. I will, oh, thank you. Okay. I'm going to just share a graphic image. Yep. And let's see if it's, all right. Do you see that image? I hope, and not me. Okay, perfect. All right. Let me hide me. All right. So this is just a graphic image, but I do have an engagement rubric and assessment that our schools and departments will be completing. And as you're aware, we're busy getting kids back. We've been busy bringing students back since our SLLs opened and in October when we brought back pre-K and our EC students. So timing is everything because we want to dedicate the right amount of time. But when we think about family engagement, we often look at these first two blocks. We often think communication, which is important, and participation. And we often sometimes forget these other tenets that are equally important when we're talking about engaging families. And so part of this, it's actually a rubric. It's a page for each of these elements. And school teams, principals, teachers, PTO parents, whomever, will meet and collectively fill these out. And basically in each area, they identify 4 examples of effective practice, 4 ways that we're connecting learning at home and school. Of course, we've gotten really good at that since last March. 4 ways we collaborate with the community, 4 ways that we understand and appreciate the role of family. And so as teams go through this rubric, and I've done this a number of places, we realize that we're not great at everything, that it has to be very intentional and thoughtful. And part of the process is what is our outcome? What do we want family engagement to look like? How do we know that we're successful? And I think the same could be true for this group, this committee's function is looking at community engagement. When do you know you're successful? And so part of the process with the Flamboyant Foundation is that we have to define as a district, what is family engagement? What is community engagement? And what are the outcomes we want? And so as part of going through this assessment and rubric with schools, those teams will define what their goal and outcomes are for each of these 7 foundational items. And then they'll also note, are we in developmental stage? Are we building, or are we sustaining? And that's the goal. The goal is to get to sustaining, that we've developed the processes in place, we've built what we need and system-wide, and then we sustain what we have. And so I have a question I want to ask the group, and think pre-COVID, and I know that's hard, but if you think pre-COVID, can a family be engaged fully and never walk in a school?
So Ms. Stowe, just for clarity, when you mean engagement, do you mean at all levels? Do you mean just engage with the school? I mean, obviously the answer to me is no, but I'm just curious on the wording, how you worded it. What, if we're using this rubric, obviously it's no.
Other thoughts?
I think it's tricky because some people, because of their work hours and other things, like just have so much less capacity because of how schools operate to like be in the school building, but might be incredibly involved with their children's education. So yeah, can they be engaged? It kind of depends a little bit to me.
We have some staff members, I'm thinking of, as a parent, at some point you have, and you're not even necessarily just texting about assignments, but they're just telling you about things going on, or, there are, to Sarah's point, sometimes outside the school day, if you have those important people from the school's community, those people who are really good at those types of offline relationships.
Anyone else?
I completely agree. The idea of being in schools where I get lost in the model is roles, is what's the role of the school, what's the role of the district, and I have more of a marketing kind of market analysis, right? I'm a businesswoman. So it's like, who are you trying to reach out to for what purpose and whose responsibility is it? So I think about it more of a client relationship model. And I wonder how that, maybe I don't mean to go off point, but I just wonder how that plays in all of this.
So I'm going to go circle around and get everyone. So Mr. Atherton, you brought up exactly what we have to do. It's like, well, is that engagement? I know what it looks like to me. I know what I think it is, but is that okay? That you could never step foot in the building. Obviously, that's not ideal. But as Ms. Smiley mentioned and Ms. Doyle, there are other means of which we can engage. And what came up in this week's meeting that Dr. Felder referenced with our faith-based leaders, Latino leaders and Black leaders, they said, you have to do this outside of the day because we have families that work. They even said, we work, we're not available. We're not available during the day. And so, yes, they said we're fully engaged, but that doesn't mean that we come to the building at a designated set time. And so that is just, again, why it's so important for us to define what is family engagement, what are the outcomes, and how do we know we're successful? And Ms. Hauser, to your point, engagement definitely takes place at the boots on the ground. It's the teacher, the custodian. It's part of this assessment. One of these tenets is like, when I walk in, do I feel welcome? And I don't just, do I feel welcome by the sign on the door? Is it hard for me to push that button and get in? And then I'm nervous because I'm sitting there jerking. There's all these little things that can create barriers where I don't feel welcomed. And so that's where the district level support is. What do you need where we can achieve your outcomes? What kind of support do you need? Is it funding? Is it a policy change? What is it? The positions with the family liaisons, and that was created. One component of their work is that they had to be bilingual. That is part of welcoming and obviously communicating, relationship capacity, understanding the role of the family. So I won't belabor this anymore, but I just wanted you to see this and recognize that we've got work to do, and we know that, and look forward to our schools and departments benefiting from this foundation. It's not, as they have said very eloquently, and they remind us, it's not the product, it's the process. And so I want to go back real quickly to what Dr. Keeling shared with everyone. And just a question, because this is part of what we do, part of our interview process. And just curious, what is one thing that you heard Dr. Keeling say, imply? What was her intent in that exercise?
What was the intent in the exercise? Is that the question? I'm going to stop my video because I can't tell if people are freezing because of me or y'all. So I'm just going to stop my video, but I'm here. I mean, I think a valuable thing about that exercise was showing us that our own view of ourselves is different sometimes than how other people are viewing that situation. So when the board is answering what's the culture of OCS or the history, that might be different than the members of the equity committee. And that we need to understand those multiple perspectives and that history from multiple lenses.
Yeah, I feel like the exercise was, just like Ms. Valley said, was for us to understand the different perspectives and our blind spots, and that there's a lot of work to be done to especially try and engage in different ways and be holistic in it.
I was reminded, just identifying words like I don't know, our quaintish colonial town kind of thing, you know, has a different experience or tone, or like conjures up things for someone who, you know, I might be able to look at it and recognize racism and hear it. It doesn't always hit me the same way as it might hit people of color or other people. So just, you know, being reminded that our experience or our words for things can have a different impact on other people.
Yeah. We have very different words and views. It feels like the four men and the elephant, right? That one sees it as an elephant, but some see it as a trunk, some see it as a leg, some see it as a tail. But it's going to take some time, and we don't all have the same grip, right? So we have to take some time to get there. I just have to also just, Melanie, I just thank you for that explanation of the roles. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Dr. Keeling, I'm going to wrap this up by asking you a question. Do you feel that you were heard?
I do feel that I was heard, but I guess the real way that I would know if I was heard is by the actions that happen going forward. Like if what was said makes people go back, reflect, and then I see changes in how things are done, then I would know if I was being heard. So what we just did was like an activity. So when we go out and we have our interviews and we're listening to our different stakeholders, it's important for us to make sure that they felt heard. So one of the things that I say is, we talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, you know, people will say, much like Ms. Smiley and Mr. Atherton were saying, that, oh yeah, we're diverse, we're inclusive, we're equitable, but we're only as diverse, inclusive, and equitable as those who are closest to the inequity feel that we are. So we can't say that, oh, I heard you, if that person didn't feel heard. And so part of what we're learning in Flamboyant is to change the way that we engage with people and the conversations that we have, and not to rush to action. And I heard that being said a lot today, and that's good, because in some other meetings, I don't always hear that. I hear us trying to come up with a solution without taking the time to really understand people's perspectives. And so, that this piece that Ms. Stowe did was part of the process, right? It's also us kind of showing you what this process is like for us, and for us to carry that back to, because it's not that the Flamboyant Fellows are the only ones who are to walk away knowing how to engage, right? Part of our work is to take this back and make sure that schools and administrators and teachers and the board and district leaders all know how to engage. So I'm just making sure that people feel heard, and that we don't, as Mr. Atherton said, have this blind spot that makes us think we hear people, or we may hear from one or two people and think that they speak for everyone. So that's all I have, Ms. Stowe. I don't know if you had other conclusions or tying it together.
Can I just, I'm sorry, I know I'm interrupting, but Dr. Keeling, I just wanted to thank you for what you just did in this meeting, which was share a reflection with the board of something that you've observed in a way that may hinder us in taking the right next steps towards equity, by sort of, what you just said. I won't reiterate it, but the act of you sharing that with us, I think, is actually a powerful thing in and of itself. So just really wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Smiley. Ms. Stowe, did you have anything else?
No, I just appreciate the committee's time and engagement. And, as I mentioned, we're just really excited about the process and the good work that will come. And, equity and engagement, community engagement, family engagement, it's all intertwined. We can't have one without the other. And I look forward to this committee's work in helping us find what is community engagement? How do we know that we were successful? And so anyway, I appreciate your time.
So I have a question regarding the, I'm sorry, hold on just a minute, Bonnie. The rubric, Ms. Stowe and I had a conversation yesterday, and so I'm going to turn off my video in case I'm having a problem. When you talked about the rubric this morning, it reminded me of a conversation we had. And so could you say a little bit more? Is this an exercise that you're already taking to certain groups or teams like schools? And is that part of the landscape analysis that you're going to have different groups like identify their strengths?
Ms. Doyle, this hasn't, I've used this elsewhere, but this tool, we haven't implemented it yet because we're just so busy bringing kids back safely. And also this tool needs to go through cabinet and potentially extended cabinet, because I've used it elsewhere, but it needs to be tweaked so that it fits the needs of Orange County. But then we will use this certainly this school year, because this is part of our landscape analysis. We have to assess ourselves and we have to know, what is our baseline? Where are we at? What are we doing well? And where do we want to grow?
Thank you.
Karen, and I really, really appreciate these comments and these words. I have a question about vocabulary, because I think we use words differently. And I'll give you a less chart. One of my more interesting ones is IEPs. IEPs in the white community are considered something that I must have when my child is falling behind. And IEPs in the Black community are perceived as a way that schools label children, and it's reflective of the school's failure in terms of really reaching into a child. So here you have a simple feature that we offer in our schools. It's even in the new legislation, but we culturally have very different views of what it is. And I don't know how, and even the word traditional, I bet if we went around and said, what do you mean? I'm sure we would all there a way, and until we start talking to each other and having these really hard conversations, I don't know how we get to these real differences when we use words. One of my buzzwords is I use the word articulate with a Black person. It's like, oh, because for me, call me articulate any day and I'll be highly complicated, complimented, but it has it's kind of so I just wonder if even in the flamboyant work and if you get into this issue of vocabulary, meanings, and cultural differences in how we use words.
It certainly could be part of Flamboyant. In my work in communications, part of what I do is have individuals from different backgrounds continuously review communication we're sending and provide feedback. And that's looking at culture, different people, different cultures, but also when communicating, because you're exactly right. One of our Latino partners stated, we don't use acronyms ever. We spell everything out. And so we have to be cognizant, and we have to be able, again, to look at communications that come from my office. And I have to be able to take the feedback that you did a poor job in this area. So I'm constantly sending things, and not necessarily to folks here, but to my colleagues across the country. Like, is this working, and getting that feedback. And I know that Dr. Keeling, I think that's part of something we're doing with the equity audit or the equity plan, where we're having someone look at some of our communications at the district level. And I might need you to chime in because I know we've talked about it, but I don't know all the details.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they will dig in that deep. I mean, it would be fine if they did. I mean, I actually did my dissertation, my methodology was a discourse analysis. And I did that because I'm always very mindful and attuned to what people are saying and dissecting, like, but what did you really mean by that? I'm very aware of that. And to your point, Ms. Hauser, it makes me think of, like, we look at test scores and we like to say that, or we say that, like, Black students, their literacy scores are low, or ESL students or emerging bilinguals, their literacy scores are low because of, for us, literacy is being able to read the words on a page and comprehend them. But there's other forms of being literate. And for people of color, the ability to read people, they're very literate in that. We are very literate in that. For our safety, for our survival, we have to be able to read you and decipher those words that you're saying, because you may say, bless your heart, but what we know is that is not a compliment, right? So part of this work is, and I was saying this to Ms. Stowe last night, we have to go back and listen to, when we do these interviews and record them, we're gonna have to really listen to what people are saying, because we're gonna have to do that analysis at that level. And one thing we have to do as an Orange County school district is to develop a common language, a shared language, so that when, let's just say IEP, for example, is said in Orange County schools, everyone understands what that means. And it may look differently when they go to Durham public schools, right? But some of that will be for us to develop. What is this shared language of family engagement? As a community and as a district, we all know what that means when we say that. So that is part of the work, and that's the very hard part of the work. And it also goes back to being reflective, so that I have to be mindful that when I say a word, I'm always very slow. Sometimes I know I talk a lot, but I'm also constantly making sure that, what am I trying to say right now? And so we have to constantly do that. When someone calls us out and says, what you just said was offensive, or what you just said, you may not have thought you meant that may not have been your intent, but that's how I took it. We have to take that and reflect. And so the next time we know, okay, I shouldn't be saying articulate, or I have to understand what articulate, when a white person says that to a Black person, what does that mean? So yeah, that's my always long-winded way of trying to answer people's questions, because I love words, but yeah.
I appreciate your all your work, so, and Dr. Ling, both with the Flamboyan Fellowship specifically, but just also in general, and the honest sharing, so that we're all kind of growing in this common language together. We aren't like separate pieces so much. There questions or comments about the Flamboyan Fellowship update from anybody? I'm going to pass the mic in a minute here to Mr. Atherton, who's going to share an EC update and a CTE update. Well, do you want to go ahead and get started?
I'm ready. All right. So, as the group knows, we were looking at SNAC and Chapel Hill to understand, how they managed, how it was done, how did people interact, and I had sent out my notes on that and their bylaws. And just as a reminder, what we found was SNAC at Chapel Hill is driven by the district. So there are bylaws. It's really stood up by the district, and the parent involvement is quite large. In fact, you see representation at each school level, and the parents set up the meetings in conjunction with the EC director, and it is put together as a form of continuous improvements and communications. It is not the place, for example, if an individual has a personal concern or issue, that would be handled through normal channels. But if there was something that came up from that or others and new ways of engaging or educating, would come through that group and would be discussed. And they have speakers that they bring in, and educators, and new legislation. So it's quite encompassing. Really, many people I've talked to has listed it as a gold standard. They also, Chapel Hill had mentioned that Durham had what they call DSNAC, which is the Durham version. And I reached out originally to the school board, and eventually I found out that Durham's is not driven by the district. It is an independent group that was created, and I shared those bylaws as well. So a very different model. You know, they did Durham's group was very, very helpful, and you know, explained that before they created their group, they viewed many different other groups to figure out what they believed would work for them. It's a strong partnership, but separate is the way that it was described. They invite schools to participate, others. When I ask who runs the meeting, obviously it's the parents. But the EC does attend their meetings as the school representative. And they told me that it took them about 3 years to form. And you know, I asked, that seems like a long time. What they said was based on looking at all the different models and wanting to be separate, that they got a lot of input around it. They do some of the things they do in their meetings. The topics, again, are parent driven. They vary from like IEP education, you know, common support systems, things that may or not be known about camps, engagement, social interactions, different support mechanisms. So a gambit of different topics that they covered throughout the year. It's strict voluntary. You know, there are cases where they work with the different PTAs, so they are outside the PTA on different items that they may reach out to a PTA and say, hey, would you be interested in an IEP education? And so that's where they would engage. You know, I asked them what was kind of their big challenge, and you know, the one that they have is the transitions and engagement can go up and down depending on what's going on. So there's an element of consistency that they're having to deal with, just because, you know, it is parent driven, and just like a PTA, you've got to make sure who's, you know, when somebody's leaving the school, who's going to be coming back, or, you know, who are the next people and how do they find out about it. The other thing they mentioned was, you know, school board engagement varied. They did mention they had one school board member that was very engaging, and in fact, they were in the group before they got elected, and they still have conversations. A lot of their process is built into media communication and the social interactions throughout the community. And one of their big motivations, and I should say this was for all the snack groups I talked to, was, you know, families need to know you're not alone, and there are ways to engage, and what services and options you have available. And that seemed to be one of the largest values that was mentioned when they talked about the groups, was many families are not sure, you know, what services are available or other groups that they could talk to, and just learning together was one of the big elements that all the snacks had mentioned. And the last thing I'll say is it came up as well that it helps the community engage in a two-way discussion, whether it's, hey, you know, here are some issues that we see. What is the district doing about it? What is SNAC doing about it? You know, and some of those turn to, you know, legislation or, you know, opportunities for group help, or even doing things that are different and unique, if you will. But that's the update I have. I think part of, you know, what I would encourage us to do is us to go think about this and have it as our next topic about what we think we should do. And, you know, I would love to hear from, you know, Connie and, you know, Dr. Felder, their thoughts on this. Because I do think it's personally, you know, I think it's a good engagement with, you know, a different part of our community, people that are looking for answers and, you know, want to have, you know, discussions about specific things. But I'd recommend us to, you know, think about it and then have that discussion more in depth on what it means for us. But if there are any questions on this, I'd be glad to answer or clarify.
If I could just say thank you very much, Mr. Abington, very helpful, very informative. Yeah, I'm for anything that will help improve engagement and outcomes for our children. So I look forward to learning more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Felder.
And Mr. Atherton, if I could just add, I'm more familiar with the Durham process on how they did that.
Yeah.
And I could probably have their director talk with you, because she has a lot of good insight into that. The one thing that they did that was very helpful is they engaged the ECAC, the Exceptional Children's, I forget what the A and C is, but it's a state resource, and they really helped Durham's PSNAC go ahead and develop, because from experience, sometimes these SNAC groups can become very adversarial with the EC director, and that, you know, you've known me a long time. I am not that person. I want to work with parents, with families. This whole department does. And so the way that Durham went about it and really helped having ECAC engage with them really helped to form the bylaws so that the EC department and EC folks worked in conjunction, and it wasn't, it's not been adversarial at all. So I would encourage you to reach out to ECAC if you haven't already.
Can I interrupt? Just, I'm not familiar with ECAC. Could you tell me just a little bit more, Ms. Crimlin?
Sure. It is a parent education group that works closely with, you can either work with them at a district level, or our Department of Public Instruction engages with them a lot. And they really are a helpful, I'm going to get the acronym. Mary Ellen's listening to, Exceptional Children's Assistance Center. They are a wonderful resource that helps parents navigate the special education system, but it also helps parent groups set up set up these advisory councils, which are wonderful. Again, with their help, Durham's was a very productive and fruitful group. And so, you know, I would encourage you to reach out to them. And I will talk to the director in Durham to see if I can get the person who a contact for you, if you would like that.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Your point is spot on. And I just want to echo it, is it shouldn't be adversarial because it's not productive. And when I talked to Chapel Hill about this, they were very firm. When I talked to the parent side and the school side, we will shut it down in a meeting if it starts becoming that way, because per our bylaws, yes, we want to hear your concern. We understand you've got an issue and it may be specific, but this is not the forum for that. We go through the school process to address that. And it was very clear that everybody was, you know, even Durham, you know, Chapel Hill had mentioned that, you know, for this to be productive and people wanting to go to the meetings and seeing the value of it, wasn't to go in and point out every little thing that's happened. It's been more of, hey, let's get parents engaged, you know, teachers engaged, and let's rise each other to that level to make sure everybody's informed. So I appreciate you pointing that out, because what you don't want is a forum where it's uncomfortable, it's not productive, and we're not improving the outcomes of our students.
And you know, we have so many things that we would love to share and educate the whole community about. You know, all the way from how do you use people first language when you talk about students with disabilities or our students with an IEP? It's always about the student or the family. All the way to, hey, how can we better engage like Special Olympics to be part of our community? So again, we've had a list of topics. We have wanted to do this. Mary Ellen, who's listening, but she has worked with the parent engagement course or training from DPI. But due to COVID, that disbanded for temporarily. But again, we have so much we would love to educate the community, the families, and then how to work with IEP teams. Because again, our role, if Central Services attends an IEP meeting, we are that neutral body to help parents and schools come to an agreement of how we're going to move forward. So again, I'm very glad that that this is being worked on. I'm very pleased. And again, if there's anything I can do to partner or to advise, I would be more than willing. And I'm sure that, you know, the rest of the folks in the office would be happy to do so as well.
So one thing I could do is maybe me and you, Connie, should get together and just share notes and maybe come up with, here's kind of some thoughts on this, Carrie, if you're okay with that, versus just coming back independently. Maybe that would help.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I know Jennifer had to leave. I know she'd like to be looped in too. So if you can with her too, that would be great, Will. But I think that'd be great if you and Ms. Crimmins gathered and discussed.
That would be great. I would welcome that very much.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
Did you have a sense, Will, about like seeing the two different models, and you mentioned that Chapel Hills was like a gold standard. I guess we're wondering, like, with us, if it, I'm stopping my video in case I'm breaking up or something. You know, the Chapel Hill model being like within the district and the Durham one being separate. Are you feeling like you don't know yet which is better for us, or are you leaning one way or the other? Or?
I'd rather talk to Connie a little more about it. There are pluses and minuses to both sides. There's some sustainability things. There's, what was shared with me is, although Chapel Hills, like I said, as I've talked to multiple people, was that it's kind of the gold standard, but it didn't start that way, right? It was a tough road to get where they are, and to have the discipline and structure around it, to Connie's point, that it wasn't adversarial, right? And I'll say that it wasn't adversarial, but anything that starts is going to have its growing pains and trying to do it. So although I have thoughts on it, I'd rather have that conversation with Connie and us to have that two-way conversation on thoughts, because I don't have the insight to everything. So I would rather, glean some from an expert, and then also I have a few other resources to go talk to as well, to get some thoughts to share. Here's the pluses and minuses of both. So I'd like to defer at this point, if you don't mind.
Did you see how were they in terms of inclusive participation, like from the broad community? Like, were they both like diverse and representative of the full community, or did one model seem more inclusive? Like, do we have concerns about that too, as related to the rest of our discussion this morning? How do we consider that piece of it?
Yeah, that's key to me as part of that discussion. And like I said, it's very different between the two, just because of the way that it's managed and how the engagement is, right? When you're external, you are essentially engaging PTAs and others to get involvement, where the district driven is really at a school level that has more access than the volunteer model. So again, there's pluses and minuses, and I think what I'd like to come back with is kind of here's pluses and minuses, and to your point, engagement, sustainability, things that make these successful, because like I said, I didn't see the models as one being bad or good. It was different, and it's just the way the groups chose to do it, because the groups have different flexibilities when it's district driven versus independent, and how money can be raised or not raised and things like that.
Sorry, I had a dog barking here. I had to send my dog out. I'm curious, that makes me think of the Durham board member Giovanni Lewis, who shared the Parents of African American Children model that she implemented there. And I'm curious if you want to ask her, if you want me to ask her, because they so actively pursued involvement in PTAs, I wonder how, if there was active like pursuit of participation in the DSNAC as well. That's someone you could ask or think about.
Yeah, I did talk to multiple board members from Durham about this, and once the group became independent, there was a separation. So in the sense that there is discussion with the board members, but the board members, for example, don't attend the meetings. So there is some separation to ensure, it's kept as an independent entity, but it doesn't mean they're not participating. I don't want to give that. So they're just, again, it's just different ways that they're engaging.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Atherton from anybody? Thank you so much for doing all that research, Will. I know that's a really important school community, so I'm really glad that this is underway. Okay, if there aren't other questions, I think Will's going to talk about CTE.
Yes. So do you want me to, maybe I should just share the presentation as I go through it, not draining the slides, if you will, but just talking through these, and this is not anything that, you know, hasn't been shared with the community and public. This is the presentation that came out of a task force that the board put together a couple of years ago. I'm just downloading it now from the website.
I think I think we have plenty of time. Going through that would be, because
Okay.
probably some of us have read it, but some of us haven't. So just be good to get us on the same page.
Okay. All right. Let's see. It looks like I do not have the ability to share. Is Todd on? Let's see, who has the ball? Oh,
You do now, Mr. Appleton.
thank you. All right, so let me share. All right, if you could just confirm you can see.
Yes.
Yep.
See.
Excellent. So as I mentioned, the board a couple of years back put together a CTE committee, and we met at a regular interval and covered lots of items. And this is the outcome. So the board members we had on there was myself, Dr. Alkiotis, Tony, Matthew Roberts, but I want to emphasize Hillary McKenzie was every meeting, Brenda Stevens was there, so lots of broad board participation during the meetings. Ms. Braxton was one of the key people from the CTE. Connie Crimmins was there. We had Buck Curtis, who was a business owner in the community. Keith Yao, who has retired, who was in charge of woodworking and Cedar Ridge, was part of that. And we had, various people that were pulled in during the discussions that presented or gave us more perspective as we looked at state items, how a CTE program was created. Do we have custom that are just for Orange County? So very big. The mission we had was to look at a vision for the CTE program, and these goals that were put together was a combination of everybody that was on the committee, what we wanted to see or get out of this committee meeting. A lot of this was education and learning, really what CTE is, right? And that's career technical education. I find most of the time when I'm out in the community and I say CTE, people will be like, what's career technical education? And as soon as I say vocational, people go, oh yeah, I get what that is. But the unfortunate is, a lot of people view that to be in a CTE class, you are not in a normal degree program, which is completely not true. And also, learning about these are life skills that you can leave the school with or go straight into a career with. So all of the goals we went through, had different meetings to discuss them, and then come back on, you can see we grouped these up into different types of meetings where we had the discussions and then covered each area as we went through. One of the top ones was, cultivating the potential of all the students, for example, identifying, how people understand the CTE meanings and the needs and our programs. And, we also did a review of our CTE process and programs as we went through these. As a result, we came up with a very, big vision statement. I was very impressed with how quickly the team and everybody came together with the vision statement, and, talking about, alignment with students, parents, community involvement, our program, an emphasis on work-based skills, job site experience, as well as the academics to be qualified to compete in careers of their choosing. So this is saying, you can go to CTE and go to college. You can go to CTE and go to a community college, or you could go into a career-ready job. And in all of those cases, you will get experience in life lesson skills and, decide where you want to be in your career, right? Where do you like to engage in the different types of programs we have offered? One of the things we talked about was, innovative and the flexible pathways that allow students to discover, hey, I thought I liked accounting, but I found out I'm better with computers. Or I thought I liked computers, but I really found out I don't have a passion for it. Or, hey, we have some introductions to medical. So giving the students the ability to experience that, see what skills, and, the word we used was chart an appropriate path to employment, career, or college choices. But all of that was trying to focus around the students and the parents' understanding, and the district. How do we get that input and ensure we have these programs as things change? For example, one of the discussions we had was, hey, here in Hillsborough, we do have a hospital with a huge expansion. Are we providing classes and opportunities that students could come directly out of school and had some experience in that? Are they able to do internships there? So a lot of thought was in there. Now the recommendations, I'm definitely not going to go through all of these because there are a lot. There was a lot of items that were brought up and items tagged to, what does the group feel like we need to do? And, one of the things that, came up most often was marketing, and really, I would say engagement, right? Which is, people are unsure. If you go to Cedar Ridge's website, and how CTE is presented there is differently than at Orange, and there's different offerings. And, if you go and look at all the offerings, it gets very cumbersome because it's not in layman's terms. And so, everybody felt strongly that we really needed like guides that people could go type in healthcare, and you would get, these are things that are healthcare related. I want to know about computer, and you would show all the computer items, or, any common language that somebody could type in to see. And also, something that would show, oh, if you're in middle school, here are items that are related that you could take. And then here are the high school. So people could see the path through our district on that. A lot of people we would find out weren't aware of the programs until high school, and that program may be only offered in middle school for whichever reason, an introductory class, for example. We talked about the Business Advisory Committee. That's a committee where we get different business owners that are in our community that are looking at the programs we have and making recommendations, talking about what they're seeing, what they believe is missing as skill sets that they need in the marketplace. Also talking about, programs where we have internship. And one of the things that we talked about was, how do we get more small businesses to be engaged with, the opportunity to do interns, and several good stories. For example, the News of Orange reached out to them. We've got a student. Well, we've got multiple students at this point, at the News of Orange. Also at Gateway, the restaurant, having students engaged that are going through, more food prep, food understanding, being a chef, and all of those opportunities to take learned into actuality. Talking about lineman program, where students are engaged in learning how to maintain our power grid and, safety precautions, and getting interns in there. I think one of the other interesting internship, and as part of our landscaping contract that we have currently that maintains our schools, is that company actually employs students and teaches them how to run a business, how to maintain equipment, how to ensure they're doing quality work, and all about, learning and going to that next step for the students. Let's see, if there's not any questions on this sheet, I'm going to just go to the next, because there are just so many here. One observation that I'll highlight is the need for both English and Spanish on our site. We know that's been a problem that we've been working on, district-wide. One of them was talking about the board's ability to get headlights on new programs as they come about. Talking about the Student Achievement Committee to review the information first. But since we don't have that committee anymore, maybe it comes through here. I don't know. Discussing, you'll see most of these say marketing makeover, and all of that is talking about having, a website, materials that parents can easily consume and understand that there are options available. How do they engage? And, we talked about FAQs, people not understanding that, hey, if I take a CTE class, is that going to change, when I graduate, right? Is there a special CTE degree? There's not, Also talking about, the EC opportunities through CTE. One of our great engagements that, Connie Kremens and team with the UNC Dentistry School, where we have special needs students that actually were involved with cleaning of the rooms, the devices, and we actually had a student that was hired out of that program. And one of the things that I heard over and over during that experience was, every time they were looking to do something, our students were stepping up. Our students were wanting to do more. They wanted to engage more, and just how a great opportunity it was with us engaging our local universities. Next page, again, what you see is marketing makeover everywhere. And all of these, although they're different topics, you'll see ability to search single website in layman's terms. It's all about how do we translate academic terminology to, parents, how they can look it up, or a student, and how do we outreach in those. A lot of it is we have such a vast offering and it's not well known, right? And that's always the challenge we have with any programs we have, is how do we get that outreach? And so that's why I feel like this kind of discussion is appropriate here, because we're talking about community engagement and how do we ensure everybody's aware of these programs, especially the programs that have the potential to allow students to do some kind of journeyman or internship, whether it's paid or unpaid, but allowing the students and families to know that these opportunities are in there. Next page, talking about, social media, newspaper coverage. Some of the things that were brought up was equipment in some of the classes. A lot of the feedback we got was some of the equipment was donated early on, but it's aging. And, how do we do that when, some of this equipment is highly expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars for some of the equipment. Again, the intern opportunities at the district level for students in our community, barriers, that was one of the key things, was talking about, students, how do they get transportation? And we're one of the only districts known that offer transportation from our high schools to community college to actually take the classes. One of the things here you see listed as CTEC Center with Chapel Hill Schools, one of the discussions was, should we try to create a central tech center that is both Chapel Hill and Orange County, and it's a place for, hands-on learning and, what could be done with that. I know the county had a discussion about this and was a little confusing to me why that discussion, we weren't engaged as a board about, doing that. But, this is something that is hands-on, really centralized, and both Chapel Hill and Orange could benefit by collaborating, if there's funds to do that. But again, money, transportation, other items that are barriers for students to be able to take that opportunity, especially if you were in high school and you wanted to take a class, but you don't have a transportation. That was addressed by us adding buses, but right now, fortunately, there's remote learning at this point. All right, and that's the end of the slide deck. I know I cruised through it, but it's one of those that the discussions, the engagement. There are so many exciting opportunities and classes we offer. Listening to the awards, I know there's a lot that the groups are releasing. Ms. Braxton, I know I'm seeing on Twitter all the acknowledgments of students that are getting their certifications. So when they come out of school, they already have a certification. Many that businesses are looking for, some that will allow students to go directly into the workplace. But I'll stop here for questions and also give Ms. Braxton a chance to chime in. I just can't say enough for Ms. Braxton's engagement in this, how much change has happened in that group in such a small time. The one last thing I'll mention is we had, before COVID, we had our first signing event where we actually had students lined up with the businesses, and the students were committing to go straight into the workplace. And There was one case where a student in high school had engaged a local car dealership, and they started off paperwork filing, if you will, and by the end, the dealership had offered this person a full-time job and was going to pay for this student to become a certified technician that could go anywhere with it. So just the amount of engagement from the community and the opportunities, it's been amazing. But I'll stop there. And Ms. Braxton, any comments or thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Atherton. Thank you for initiating this task force back. I think it was in maybe 2018 is when it might have started, and
Yep.
we completed that. I see the date there of June 19. I came on board in January of 19, so some of this conversation had started before although I was in the district, right, as a teacher, but before I started as a director. And so you're right. There's a lot that's happened. We have really tried to increase the marketing because of the district's new website that has really enabled CTE. If you haven't found CTE on the website, it allows our office to really manage that site so the information is always current and updated. And that site has grown, and we've added a glossary on the website so that we can look at what does CTE stand for? What is IEP? What is a concentrator? That's a new word because it used to be a completer, right? So people who may have learned the word completer, now completer's out the window. And with Perkins 5, which is the new federal legislation, it changed to a concentrator. So it's really important that we continue to have this vocabulary list because it is ever growing. When we talk about CDCs, we're not talking about the Center for Disease Control. We're talking about our career development coordinators, which are instrumental at our high schools. So I really appreciate that. Our course registration guide book has involved even more. We have graphs in there now, pictures that are color charts. We've even linked to Orange and Cedar Ridge's very specific courses because although we have all of these state courses, and then we list what's in the district, always what's in the district's not at each one of the high schools. And so we've got a link. And Orange High School department chair created a bubble chart, which is really easy to follow. So it's bubble pictures. And the school counselors are using those to help students to register for the right classes. So it is a lot about marketing, and it's about making sure that the community is informed. And one of the best ways to do that is through our website and then through person to person, which is our CDCs, our teachers, and then our school counselors at the school to really do that educating. So I really appreciate the review of what happened with the CTE task force committee that looked at CTE. There's still some more to do from those recommendations. I would love for you to be able to search keywords. I remember one of the things that we talked about was how to have businesses that were looking for interns or for businesses that were looking to have a student come to Job Shadow where they could put the information into a database and then we could access that. I know that there's one that's been really wanting, a business that's really been wanting a intern. I can't think of the name of it. It's a bakery here in town that makes crackers. And it's really hard, right, finding that right person. But I think we were working on that this year, even during COVID. And one more thing I just want to follow up on. You mentioned that signing event that happened pre-COVID. I just wanted to point out that even during COVID, that same car dealership that you mentioned that's local, they were able to sign another student, and that was during COVID.
That's fantastic.
And they signed that student who graduated to continue to work. And so that's really exciting. And then the other thing that we're constantly looking for is apprenticeship opportunities for our students, a way for them to go straight from high school, straight to an industry where they are learning on the job and coupling that with community college, continuing education. And so we continue with those conversations as well. It is a work in progress. and it constantly is changing. And so we appreciate that. Thank you for letting me speak.
I think one of the one thing I'll highlight was that the apprenticeship, what I learned at least when we talked to businesses, where they were afraid of that commitment and they wanted to do much smaller, right? I can commit, I'm a small business, I could do an intern, but I really can't do what you define as an apprenticeship because I don't have the means. We can't guarantee it. And I think that was one of the important things that helped us get into, Gatewood or, News of Orange and other opportunities. So I think that was one of those aha moments that it was like, wow, we just didn't know that that was a concern, and just changing the aperture of, the conversation has just made so many more opportunities. And it's just been impressive what y'all been able to do in a short time.
If I may just join the conversation. Whoa, sorry. Trying to manage too many things here all at one time. So thank you, Ms. Jackson. I really appreciated your overview. That was the kind of information that I've been trying to connect with. And I know that I had a meeting with Ms. Braxton and her team, and then of course had to cancel on the team, which I felt really bad about. But as I'm learning about the district and all of the awesome work that we've been doing here, this was one of the areas, right? And I've been very fortunate the last 2 years to do a lot of work, around the CTE world. And so it's really exciting to hear what Orange, where we are in that process. And I think, and I love the vision statement, right? And there would be only one word that I would add in there, because it's not one or the other. It doesn't have to be college career, and trying to help our families to understand that it's college and career, because there's a lot of stigma also around old school vocational kind of thinking and who went into vocational. And then, it's, technical skills are at a very different level, as we all know. And so it's very different CTE, to both tech. But I am really excited about joining Ms. Braxton and the team and helping us to continue our vision and expanding that thought, make it a pre-K through college alignment, right, of the way we think about it, because it doesn't just start in high school. And what I heard you say, like the committee would really like, is that exploration to be done. And it should start in pre-K, but then really heavy emphasis in middle school. And so, I'll be connecting with the team to take a look at how are we offering that CTE exploration in middle school, because there are some programs out there that really will allow the students to have that exposure to the different types of careers. Because now with the New Perkins 5 guidelines, at the high school level, we do need the students to select an area of study and stick with it so that they can become that concentrator, right? So we want to make sure the students have that exploration opportunity in middle school as much as possible. And then in high school, and then always connecting it with, yes, what kind of certification, license, will be connected, because it would be, unfortunate for them to have gained all this skill and knowledge and then not have a certification that will allow them to have employment opportunities. And the question that I had was, has the Orange County region conducted an emerging labor market analysis?
I would leave that to Ms. Braxton. I think that's part of the Business Advisory Council, but I don't know.
Okay. Usually that's, I think like the Chamber of Commerce. I don't know if they, but we can connect. I didn't know if they had been done and then you were aware of one.
Yes. May I interrupt? So I had to grab my map because I have to look at this, because Orange County, as we say oftentimes with Orange County is a unique county. And the reason why I say that is that Orange County is not really in a specific, or we don't have our own specific labor market or labor division. So when you look at this map, we're part of the North Central Prosperity Zone, which
Okay.
is guided by the North Central region. They, like right above us, the counties right above us, they have a CAR-TAR workforce development board, but we're not part of that. Durham has its very own workforce development board. And then Wake and Johnston, they have their capital area workforce board, but we don't. So we kind of, we send representatives to all of those. And so we're kind of holding on to the coattails of those. But then there's this whole big unit of the central region that has that labor market. So there's not been a specific one just for Orange County, but I will say, you know this through board meetings, but I will say that Orange County schools and Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools combined our business advisory. We had our first combined business advisory in November. And so together as a whole county with 2 school systems, that may be something that we want to look at doing, but we would have to figure out which one of those workforce labor market boards to pull on.
Yeah, that's great context.
One other thing I would mention that when many of us went to the School Boards Association's annual meeting, and one of the things that we saw there was other schools that have this really cool website where you could go in and say, I want to be a medical technician, and it would actually draw a circle around you and say, this is how many jobs are available in your area, and this is the starting pay, here's the range of pay. And it was very powerful, right? It was very powerful to be able to go in and do that. And I know we're a ways away from that, but it was just very impressive that you could see this, and families could go and the students can go and see that, to your point, what are these growth areas? What are areas that have kind of, stabilized, and it was just very impressive, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, I know that Ms. Braxton and I will be getting together with the CTE team and proposing next steps for how to grow our CTE program. And so as we put that plan together, we'll definitely be bringing that to the board. We're really excited about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Will, for the presentation and taking us back through that, and for all the updates. I'm excited about the website updates, Ms. Braxton, and Dr. Dawson. Thank you for your work and collaboration. And so at one point we said that after you all have had a chance to do that, that you'll bring back to this committee. And okay, so we can stay in touch about when, what month you'd like that to be.
And I'd just like to thank all of the board members that helped engage and helped us get all of those items together, because it was definitely, all hands on deck. I learned a lot through that process, and I think it's valuable to have a regular update to the board on just terms and graduation pathways. And I was surprised that there were even people on the committee that didn't understand that, and some of the things I'll mention that I wasn't aware of was, the work study, right? Where we have at high school, that we have students actually fulfilling jobs at our high school and learning. And so those are things that just aren't well known. So anyway.
Can I just name an opportunity that I see before we close this one out? I'm so appreciative of getting to talk about this again. I don't think we have a great way of knowing what students end up doing in the couple of years after high school. Like, I don't think we track that, both in terms of sort of college persistence or in terms of the types of roles that they go into. I think maybe Ms. Braxton, you said we do have some like right at the point of departure. Yes. But I think that like all of that sort of together, right? Those pathways and what kids end up doing after high school. I don't know I don't know how you do it. At one point, North Carolina, I think, was tracking like college completion and then like stopped tracking it or something. But that seems like just such a huge ability. Like having that would help us understand like how are we doing in setting up kids for good paying jobs or college paths.
Ms. Smiley, if I can jump in, we do. You saw my finger. We track them 1 year following graduation. So they graduate in May, and we usually get this, but we only track the CTE concentrators. So we only get that concentrator report through Power School, and then we contact them. There's several questions that we personally contact them through email or through a phone call. And in today's day of social media, when kids are changing phone numbers and email addresses left and right, we're finding people on social media and finding out what are they doing. But all we're tracking are they in military? Are they in the Peace Corps? Are they in community college? Or are they in a 4-year college? Or are they just out working? And if so, are they working in a job that's related to the pathway that they took in high school? So those are things that we report, and it's called the Concentrator Report. And so we're tracking them that 1 year after, but after that, we're not tracking. So unless they're contacting us, or unless we're following them in some way, we're not getting that. So it would be interesting to find a way to track that. You know, colleges and universities have alumni pages where they do updates, and as people get jobs or change careers or change paths, they're updating the college. And that might be something interesting to look at from the high school perspective or from the school system perspective.
That's awesome, Ms. Braxton. I can't imagine how labor intensive that actually is. I wish there was an easier way for y'all to do that. But I'm glad we're doing that. Yeah, it's sort of that concept and sort of what if we had an even fuller picture beyond the concentrators and for a little bit further out. Mm-hmm.
I know we're doing so much work as a district, amping up our communication pieces, and I know a lot of work has already gone into that. I've heard from parents how exceptional the CTE program is. And I confess, as a parent with kids in high school, I still get confused. Like, I think the point about reaching back to early grades like middle school, it shouldn't, I feel like there's almost too much burden on the district to explain this to parents, but as a parent, it's the type of thing that like you can get confused about or not pay attention to in time, or not know what options still are available for your child at different stages. And so I do think like it'll be good as we find more ways to communicate this earlier and ongoing. And but it seems like it is kind of beautifully complicated, but because it is complicated, it's, you know, easy for there to be people a little bit in the dark or a little bit confused.
And Ms.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Ms. I love how you said that, beautifully complicated, right? And what's really beautiful about it is that it's another way to meet the needs of our students, but also providing them an opportunity to be economically mobile, for them to be able to have careers that they can support their families and have a good living. And, you know, and not everyone is meant for this traditional 4-year college track. And you can, you know, in education, we kind of do these paradigm shifts, right? Everyone has to go to college, and then it's like and we have to find that happy medium and know that, you know what, yes, for some of our kids, absolutely they need to go to college and that track because that's the right fit for them. But we have a whole number of students that, you know what, you know, more of this career and education at the same time is more their way of learning. And so, you know, when I look at this with our team, we're going to be really taking a look at how relevant are our CTE programs that we currently have, how well are they aligned to the emerging labor market within the Orange County area, and then, you know, it's what pathways are there that will allow them to be that concentrator, but at the same time connect that with a higher ed opportunity. And then absolutely, we have to create more relationships with our business partners, because our kids have to be able to go out and apply their learning in the real world. So those are all things that we're going to do. It is, I shouldn't say that not going to do, that is what we're doing. We're just looking to continue to grow that because I know Ms. Braxton and her team, they've been doing a lot of work and have done great work. And But even the way we look at like the literature we buy for our little children, like I know when, you know, when my friends have kids, like I'm buying them children's books that's all around like careers and things, you know, it starts from the beginning, and that's a very easy way that we can do that, right? So I love that. It's beautifully complicated.
Thanks, everybody. Does anyone have more questions for Ms. Braxton or Dr. Dawson or for Mr. Atherton? Okay, we have one more item, which is really just sort of an update that I wanted to share in terms of some mental health conversations going on that I've had the chance to be a part of, and I'm sure there are many. I know it's been kind of a hot topic. And I see that Ms. Cobb is on the call, so feel free to jump in if you want to add anything, Ms. Cobb. But there are two committees I've been a part of. One is called MHCC, which is the Mental Health Community Collaborative, and it is joint between Orange County Schools and Chapel Harbor City Schools, and Ms. Cobb is on that committee, and I was able to attend their January meeting. And another committee, which I don't have as much to say about at this point, but I want to mention before I forget, there's the School Health Advisory Committee that meets with Mr. Lewis. He oversees that, and we have subcommittees. And I chose to be on the subcommittee that's social and emotional wellness. And so we've been meeting as a subcommittee and talking about mental health as well. So that subcommittee has like some community members. It has one of the elementary school social workers. We've invited one of our middle school social workers. And so we're just getting started. The subcommittees of SHAC sort of pick like a goal way to engage. It's kind of like what we're saying with community engagement. We need to listen before we plan something. And so right now we're in a lot of listening and conversation about mental health. But I don't have as many specifics to share from that. I wanted to share a little bit from the Mental Health Community Collaborative meeting regarding sources of strength. Do you want to add anything before I move on to this, Ms. Cobb, because you're more knowledgeable about it than I am?
No, not right now. I'll jump in if you need me to.
Okay, all right, okay. So, Mr. Jones, could I share my screen, please? And also, do y'all think a video would even work, or is it too glitchy?
Not the audio portion, it won't work.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. All right, so how do I turn off the audio portion? Okay, I think I'm going to just go to a couple like spots in this video and to highlight a couple things. I sent this out to board members last night, and I can figure out how to share the website. You can kind of see the website up here. It's called Sources of Strength. And so this is an organization that was founded in North Dakota, and they were dealing with a lot like high suicide, and they're trying to figure out how to successfully address the mental health problems in their community. And they created something called Sources of Strength, which we are now looking at between the two school districts of implementing. And so it's, I think their mission is, it's a universal suicide prevention program designed to build sociological protective influences around youth and to reduce the likelihood that vulnerable youth and young adults become suicidal. The video is 40 minutes long. It's really worthwhile. It talks about the upstream approach to dealing with mental health crisis, giving kids tools earlier personally and starting earlier in the school system than high school. And let's see if I had written down some stopping points to show. So if I go to. Okay, so this is just sort of an idea of upstream prevention. If going over the falls is having your crisis, that you want to start earlier and build up that capacity to have mental health supports. It also talks about this kind of touches on something that came up with our exercise at the beginning of this meeting this morning, with being adult-led was one of the words that came up in how we described our community. I'm going to play this for just a few seconds to get to the right image.
Carrie, I can't see anything. Are you?
Oh, thanks for telling me that. Okay. Oh, yeah, I didn't press. There we go. Okay, so you're hearing it but not seeing it so far.
Not hearing or
I'm not
seeing.
hearing anything. Oh, you're starting to share content, it says. So I think we're
There it
getting
is.
there. Yep.
We can see it.
Okay, sorry about that. The other image was literally a stream going over a waterfall, so you didn't miss much image. But so this is talking about how a lot of suicide prevention is risk focused. Maybe it shows kids videos that are sad and people dealing with depression and talk about trauma, but not giving like the strength focus, like how do we develop our hope and our strength and abilities and our sense of help. Go just a little bit farther. Sorry, figure out the best way to do this.
Miss Doyle, do you want me to kind of just give a little overview?
Yeah, that would be great. And that I was trying to get to just the next part where it talked about being peer driven versus adult driven, but go ahead, Ms. Cobb, that would be great.
So the program, well, the it is the Mental Health Community Connections Group. And as she stated, it's Chapel Hill Carver City Schools and Orange County Schools. And we're partnering with Sources of Strength to implement this program that would combat the stigma around mental health, but also the Sources of Strength would help us to define how our community could wrap around and support our students and support them in supporting each other. So it is adult driven, but teen and student led. And so from our teen mental health summit that we did, each of the high schools in each school district have developed teen mental health clubs that would then use this information, this training to support students within the building. And from the Teen Mental Health Summit, each school was allotted a certain amount of money to be able to have to budget, to be able to support these kinds of activities in supporting students. So we're trying to take the stigma away from having some mental health support needs, and put that in the forefront. Like, if you have them, it's okay. And we're here to support each other, but it's not just the adults saying that, it is students saying that, because we recognize that a lot of times peers are able to get through to each other a little bit easier than we are. I think that is where we were going, Ms. Doyle.
Yeah, that is, and I'm glad you mentioned. So there was the Teen Summit Ending the Silence from October, and then mental health clubs developed since the summit. There were students from the summit in Chapel Hill Carver schools. They have 30 of them forming a club at East Chapel Hill, and they have other clubs forming at Chapel Hill High School in Carborough. And we have one, I believe, at Partnership Academy at this point. I don't know if we have one at the other 2 high schools.
We do have one at Partnership, and the students from the other 2 high schools would be the beginning basis for the one at Cedar Ridge and Orange High School. So the children that went would be the kids that would be the beginning force to start those clubs, and then they would bring on membership. We did get information this week, actually, that we would get about $319 per school. That's going to be coming back from the monies that was donated, coming back to each of our schools, so that our kids would have that to have as a basis to start building and developing programs and activities that they could do. And then I wrote a grant through Cardinal Innovations for $1,000, and that money is going to be coming back only to Orange County schools to be divided among our 3 schools to support this work as well. So we're excited about this work and all that we could do to support our students around mental health.
Okay, that is great. Okay, so so in addition to that, I want to show just a little bit more. I know this is kind of awkward, but they did like a 6 study of the implementation of this program, and they collaborated with universities with research programs, like including Stanford and maybe one in Minnesota. And just to motivate you to watch this whole video, what they do is they sort of identify the social network of individual kids in a school, and they start as early as elementary school. So there's a point here at the 16-minute point where it shows how they mapped out a 5th grade social network. And so you'll see like each student is like a dot, and then it kind of makes a web of connections. Okay, so like they graph out all the kids in a school community. And so he was saying like these central members, you know, might be the popular kids, but they're not as resistant to change. And then there might be, like, I think this is boys and girls. And so there might be just one connecting point between boys and girls. And then there are, you know, which would be a certain student. And then there are kids who are isolated off at the side. And so what they do is they identify adult leaders and peer leaders, and so they'll go and they won't pick, you know, well, let's pick these central popular kids to be our leads in this mental health approach. They'll pick some of the kids who are they'll pick a wide variety of kids representing different parts of the social network, including some of the ones off to the side, and they do training for the peers and training for adults. So that there's this stronger network of everyone being reached. Let's see. The implementation cycle is like 2 years long, I think. And so there's like the adults commit to training, the peers commit to training, and it's very positive oriented, like it's identifying who some of your trusted adults are, and then it's kind of creating activities and messaging events about mental health, and some of the adults who are selected and trained, they emphasize that they need to be positive adults. They need to not be assigned, but they need to volunteer. Like it might be, I was talking to someone at Pathways yesterday, and one of the custodians at Pathways has always been like a real outreach person to certain groups. Might be a bus driver, might be a cafeteria worker, might be a gym teacher. So all these kind of adults who are naturally positive and gravitate towards kids might train in doing this prevention approach. I don't think I'll keep going, but just to motivate you to check out the video. It is long, it's 40 minutes long, but it's really worth it. And so my understanding, Ms. Cobb, is both schools are getting some feedback about whether or not we'll implement this. And there was some conversation that it would be like professional, there's some funding questions, like would it be professional development funding, or do you have anything where you can add about where we are in this process of talking about it?
I don't have anything as of yet. We have our meeting is coming up, actually Tuesday is our next meeting, and I know we are going to discuss it at that time.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen unless anyone has a question about more on this video, but I can't see you since I'm screen sharing, so just stop it.
I have a question, if it's okay, not about the video itself, but the program more generally. I asked, a neighbor of mine is a school psychology professor at UNC and does a lot around teenage mental health and suicide prevention and things like this. So I was like, have you ever heard of this program? And she said, oh, I wonder if you're working with this person in our school that that does a lot of sources of strength implementation. So I don't know if we're, are we connected at all with anybody at UNC who, does this kind of thing?
I can't tell you everyone, Mrs. Smiley, that is connected. I'm sure if it's somebody in this area that is connected with it, then yes, I would say yes. If we haven't, we will be getting in contact with them. Barbara Elder is a former counselor in Chapel Hill Carver City Schools. She is, I call the lead of the Mental Health Community Connections group. She is so awesome. She has her hands everywhere. And I'm sure because we were in communication with UNC when we were looking at the Teen Summit to begin with. And so that is where we get a lot of our resources of work that we are planning to do and support we're planning to put in place for kids.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, it sounded the neighbor I referenced who does a lot of this work was one of the people on that panel earlier this week that I don't know if anybody else went to, that had like mental health. It was like doctors and about supporting kids through this time. And
would you share her name or his name?
Yeah, I will. I'll email you her name. And I'm sure she would be happy to like share her thoughts about, I don't know, our plans for anything really. She does a bunch of work around also specifically students who are hospitalized and then are working on their reentry into school afterwards and how to sort of prepare them for. So she has some like cool expertise as an OCS parent. I'm sure she'd be happy to chat with.
Okay, that would be great. I would love to get in touch with her and probably invite her to some of our meetings because we do have some parents who are in the mental health field that are a part of the Mental Health Community Connections group, but they are Chapel Hill Carver City School parents. So it would be great if we could have one that is an Orange County parent. So please send me that information.
I will. And she supervises people who work in all these different districts in North Carolina as like school psychologists and stuff too. So I think she'll probably, if she has, I'll email you her name. I'll get you.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
That's great. And I noticed that we didn't have as much representation from Orange County, so that would be great. That reminds me, Ms. Smiley, that you had something else you wanted to share on this topic with parents.
Oh, it was. Yes, thank you for reminding me. It was from that call on Tuesday, where the panel was talking about how to, support kids through this time and school openings and closing, all these things. And one of the things, some of the research is just around the impact that COVID has had on parent mental health, and then the impact that has on kids, right? And I just had this like light bulb moment where I was like, what are we doing for parents? And I remembered that way back in maybe the start of the school year, Ms. Crimmins, I think you were like, I know that Kelly Underwood had done one or two sessions, I think, for parents about how to, kind of take care of yourself, like model things for your kids, like, put your own mask on first or whatever. But the one that I went to, I was like the only parent. I think people are just like, so I had a moment of like, what else can we do or might we do to like support parents, point them to resources if we're not doing it ourselves, like something along those lines.
So I do know that the SEL plan that Mr. Johnson and I are working on, we are going to submit, does have a piece in there for parent and student support. And we do have that plan that we are working on that has parent and student support sessions within it. So we are submitting that for review, and then we are looking at that. So that's one of the things that we're doing, as well as Student Support Services always has a list of support resources that would be for students and or parents as well. And some of our school-based mental health does involve pulling parents in to make sure that they are aware of what's going on and doing the right things for themselves and students as we move forward. And one of the plans that we brought before you all back in December was around having what I'm calling a COVID therapist. So we will have extra therapists that will start. We are completing that paperwork. The contract is with the attorneys just for final review. And that would be bringing in extra outside of our school-based mental health support, bringing in extra therapists that would provide support for our students. So.
That's awesome.
Can I ask, is that like, the school health advisory group so we have we have our kind of full-time therapists and then we have some contracted therapists. Would this be more like temporary people, or would these be people who would be more long-term, long-standing?
So we have our regular school-based that are, like you said, long-standing, but these would be for the remainder of this school year. And if we could find grant funding, we will continue beyond this school year with the additional 4, which are, I call them our COVID SEL support, because that's exactly what they would be doing. So this would be for students who are not necessarily in school-based therapy, right? I don't have school-based therapy, but man, COVID has really hit my family hard. I'm struggling on how to deal with this. Or we haven't been in school in so long, I don't even know how to do school anymore. I need some support around that. And so that's where these extra additional therapists would come into play.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Cobb or Ms. Cribbins? We have about 10 minutes left, and I want to just touch on a couple announcements. But any other questions?
Yeah, I don't have a question, but one comment is when we talk about the training, and you had mentioned the janitor, I think there's huge area we've got to look at, such as bus drivers. They know what's going on with the family. They talk to the kids when they're on and off the bus. First person in the school, first person out. I think also the cafeteria workers. I've gone through the cafeteria lines with my young kids, and they'll be chatting up, hey, how's your mom doing? How's your brother doing? And I think, the more eyes and ears we have to help and identify, the better. So I think looking at some of these, other employees we have within our district for that training will help out significantly, because there are so many opportunities, and I'd hate to miss one, just one.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Atherton. Last year, we began doing what we call gatekeeper training, where I trained the bus drivers, the cafeteria, and some custodians in all of the schools. We did it prior to school starting so that they could get that training in. And I just completed a voiceover of that training that will go on Canvas. So it will be available for all staff, and it is the gatekeeper training. It tells what to look for, and when you see it, who do you need to contact? And it explains that it doesn't need to happen through an email, but it needs to be an immediate contact, either face-to-face or by phone call. So that training will, as soon as it is finished being edited, it will go into Canvas, and that will be a training that all staff will have to be able to look at.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
That really is fantastic.
Go
ahead, Sarah.
Just share one tiny thing. I know you have some announcements. One thought I have about the all of the around the mental health resources, both for kids who might access them and parents who might access them, is it's just, I'm glad this is in the community engagement session. Like, I think there's something about, like, we put so much work into making these resources or connecting, listing resources and things like this, and then it's like, I mean, around mental health, it's like there's stigma around that. People are exhausted and overwhelmed, and all this stuff. And like, how do we bridge that connection between it exists to them actually accessing, feeling like they can, should, and then like taking action to use it if they really need it? Like, is it stories? Is it, I don't know what it is, but there's something about the, like, how are we doing that piece that's just on my mind, not like looking for an answer, just realizing, like, I think that's part of what makes it so hard for me as a parent to access any of it is, I know it's there. I'm just busy, etc. So.
Yes, the more we talk about it, the better. Okay, is everyone ready for me to talk a little bit about some announcements, and Will also looking ahead. So in terms of looking ahead for March, we talked about Dr. Keeling, that might be a time in community engagement that we could plan a community session for spring regarding North Carolina tribes with Ms. Kara Stewart. Is that what you're timing wise?
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely do that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so do you want to invite her to that meeting and see if that time frame works for her?
Yes, we'll do that. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Great. Does that sound good to you, Will?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay, and then we'll hear back from Dr. Dawson and Ms. Braxton about when the best time to be sharing more about CTE would be, whether that's also March or whether that's April. Those are the two kind of big things I have going on that I want to share. We've talked a number of times about some literature themed outreach that Ms. Stevens is doing, and she has a date for me to share. This is a community event, and I think I can maybe share this again if I can find it. My email's wanting me to verify myself. Let's see. Okay. Can I still share my screen? That's kind of grayed out on me right now. I don't know why. Oh, now I can. Thank you. All right. I'm still struggling with sharing my screen. I apologize here. Is anyone seeing that?
Not yet.
No, right? Okay. There we go. Okay, so this is the event. It is so it is Sunday, February 28th featuring Jackie Shelton Green, our North Carolina Poet Laureate. It's sponsored by Ms. Stevens' sorority. And so there's information here on registering. Just an email address there for questions, and I will send this out to the board, and Dr. Felder and everyone else so that we can click on it. But this is available to anyone in the community who wants to come listen to Ms. Shelton Green. And I believe Brenda said that she's going to be sharing some of her poems in advance so that we can read them in advance and then have the conversation.
Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Did Mr. Hunt or Mr. Adams, the African American history teacher at Orange High, reach out to you?
No, but I got an email through my kids. I signed up for, but no, I didn't hear from them personally.
So they were doing some, Mr. Adams was doing some research on Miss Green. I'm not sure she's a doctor. I don't want to disrespect her, but and I think they were like, because they're working on a poetry unit, and they were looking to see about connecting with her. And I knew that she was coming to speak, and I thought she was coming to our community engagement meeting, actually, so I misspoke. But yeah, so they were looking to connect with someone so that they could connect with her. And she might not be available to speak to the class, but there were just some things that they wanted to see happen. And I think she was suspended, and it was like, I think during this time of segregation, and kind of wanted to dig into that. And was it really a valid suspension, or was this like people trying to defend themselves type thing? So yeah, there's a connection there that I think Mr. Hunt and Mr. Adams is trying to make with yourself and Miss Stevens and Miss Green.
I can email Mr. Hunt. I don't have the email address of the new teacher. Maybe I could get that from you. And I can email Brenda, and we can close that circle and reach out. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Will, do you have other things that I'm forgetting that we need to do as a committee, or that's?
Well, one thing that we have outstanding, and it looks like Hillary dropped, was we had gotten all of the committees that are available, and we had some board members that, you know, talked about interest, and then she was gathering it together. And we just need to close that out so we can engage the board members and the committees, if it still makes sense, of course. So I think that one was one of our outstanding items. And I think just you know, coming back to talking about engagement with the community and the community center. So there's some conversations that we're going to be having, and I think if we could get an update on timing of that would be great. But I think that's the ones I have written down.
Right. And Jen had the lead on that, working with Dr. Florence from Cedar Grove Community Center. That's the one you're talking about. Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. And then we have kind of clarified, based on in response to last month's minutes, that we are kind of setting aside pursuing Minority Summit right now. And I do also want to say, because this came up in this meeting, that we are supportive as a meeting. We've expressed, Will and Jennifer and I expressed that we're supportive as a meeting of pursuing a Black family liaison, which has come up. And so I realize that needs to come from staff at some point, but I just want to express in this meeting that we are supportive of pursuing that when that's requested as a, you know, by Dr. Felder or staff. Okay. Oh, there we go. Stop sharing. Okay. The only other announcement I have is that tomorrow is virtual office hours, and Ms. McKenzie and Ms. Hauser are the board members that are running that. And I did see that it's already on the district website. I think it's been there for a while. And Ms. Moore requested listening in. So they're already going to be, you know, that's our max of 3 board members. Am I missing any other announcements? Okay, thank you so much, everyone who participated and contributed and listened. And I feel like we had a lot of interesting topics today, a lot to digest. And so thanks again, and close the meeting.
So moved.
All right, seconded, in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, take care, everybody. See you soon.
All right, thanks everybody.